Hey guys, and welcome to this very special episode of the Happy Knitting Podcast. If you're a new viewer, welcome, and if you're coming back, thank you ever so much. Today is, Sunday, the 3rd of February 2019. My name is Julia, and I usually do a podcast all about the knitting and yarn. So this is not going to be a regular episode. Usually I talk about what I have finished, my works in progress, what I have bought. Sometimes I talk about some spinning and just what's been happening. This is going to be a very quick Q&A question video. I'm going to be answering a couple of questions that people have asked me over on Instagram, and I will release this on the next weekend, which is a weekend on which I won't be recording a podcast, so this hopefully will make up a little bit. So I've written down 7 questions. If I get more, I will just answer them in future videos. So if you have follow-up questions and stuff, please feel free to just write them underneath this video. I have written them out, but I haven't really thought them through super much. So it's going to be a little bit all over the place and rambly, but I think that's the sort of thing you guys seem to be enjoying anyways. And of course, unlike my last episode today, I'm joined by my best friend, Mr. Coffee, whom I'll be talking about later. So I have decided to start with the knitting and yarn related questions and then move on to more sort of life in general, coffee, job, whatever sort of questions. So that's what we're going to do. I hope that you will enjoy this video, and if not, I will be back with a normal podcast episode soon anyways. So first of all, the first question was, what is the garment you ever knitted that you like the most? And I'm going to put that together with the second question, which was how many sweaters do you have and how many of them do you actually wear? So when it came to what is my favorite ever garment that I finished, I had to think about it, and quite honestly I can't pick one. Because I mean, you can't pick your favorite child, can you? I mean, maybe you can, I don't have any, but I feel like you can't. So I have decided to choose 3 of my favorite garments, which are also kind of the ones that I wear the most. And I have chosen them more in the sense of what I wear a lot rather than what is the most beautiful or whatever business, whatever sweater. Like, I have decided to choose the top 3 sweaters that I just like the most, wear the most, and they're just very comfortable. So I have chosen 3, like I said a million times now. The first one I'm wearing, this is the Emma yoke sweater, and I love this pattern. First of all, it's by a German designer called Knit for Passion, and the reason why I wear it so much is because I just love the yarn. This is yarn from a Danish brand called Garn und Salg. I think that's how you say it. Garnudsalg. It's a yarn that I found out about from Ellie of Skandir, and it's one of those typical sort of woolly, super soft yarns, similar to JC Rennie, True Halt Super Soft. They're all pretty much alike. What I really like about Garn und Salg, first of all, is that their website is entirely in Danish, so you have to work with Google Translate, and I just think that's really fun. So I actually placed another order with them a couple of days ago. But talking about the yarn, it's one of those really soft, thin, very light fingering, almost lace weight yarns. They are very, very affordable. Again, very similar to Holst and such. And this one is just the one that I think it just turns out so well with washing. It almost kind of felts, but in the nicest way. So this is definitely one of my favorite sweaters to wear because it is super, super light. I haven't used very much yarn for this at all because, of course, the gauge is pretty small. The yarn is very light. So it's a super light sweater, but that makes it very, very wearable. And I love wearing this thing around the house and going out and stuff as well. So that is definitely one of my favorites. Another one of my favorites, I feel like I've worn a lot and shown a lot, so maybe it's not the prettiest anymore, but this is my Threepmere by Isolde Teague. Again, it's a top-down yoke construction, and for this I used Jamieson and Smith 2-ply jumper weight. A lot of these sweaters I have shown before in my sweater special episode, which I will try to link to below. So sorry if I'm repeating myself, and if you haven't watched that, watch that if you're interested in this sort of sweater talk. but I wear this a lot for similar reasons. It's a little bit thicker than this one, but again, I knit this at a relatively loose gauge, and it's just super, super comfortable. It's soft, it's breathable, you don't sweat in it. You don't feel like you're kind of, I feel like some sweaters, they can feel heavy and they can kind of make you feel all crowded in, if that makes any sense. And this is definitely one of those that I just love, and I'm going to wear this thing until it falls apart. And my third sweater is again yoke construction. You can see where my head is at the moment. But I chose this one for a different reason. This is my Traysta sweater, which is a pattern by Jennifer Steingas. And this one, I love the construction, first of all. This is my second ever color work sweater, I think, that I knit. But I love the yarn. The yarn I use for this is Let Lopi, which you may know. It's a super thick, chunky, hairy, itchy, if you're being honest, yarn from Iceland. It's Icelandic wool. It is hairy. It does shed. It's not really. It is not a really soft yarn. I will be very honest with you guys. But we have winter here in Germany, and it gets really cold. And a lot of my sweaters, they're fingering weight. Yeah, the yarn, they're pretty loose. They're on loose gauges, and they tend to be more like layers rather than super warm sweaters. But this, I just put on whenever, you get home and you're kind of cold, or you think you may be coming down with something, or even for working. This is super, super warm. People generally use this kind of yarn for outerwear, but I wear this inside a lot. And again, it's super warm, but again, I think because it's 100% wool, it doesn't make you feel like well, it can make you feel like you're overheating a little bit, but for what it is, I just think it's an incredible yarn. So if ever, or we're going out for like snow walks or something, which we're going to be doing later today, because there is so much snow on the ground, this is just such a comfortable sweater. And I don't know, in the beginning I knit the sweater and I didn't really know if I was going to knit any more of Let Lopi, but I do really like it. I mean, I don't need 10 of these, like one of them is totally enough, but I do really like this one. So I hope that kind of answers your question, or your questions. Like I said, I have a couple of more sort of delicate sweaters that again are really nice, and they're kind of maybe more suitable for everyday wear, but I do wear these a ton because I like to be comfortable and I like to be warm, and I love wool. In terms of how many sweaters I have and how many of them I wear on a regular basis, I just did a quick count and I came to around 21 or 20 sweaters. I probably have some more because I always have sweaters lying around the entire place. As to how many of them I actually wear, I actually got rid of quite a few of them in the last couple of months. A couple of sweaters that just either didn't fit me personally or didn't fit my style anymore. So the ones that I have left, which are, like I said, around 20, are ones that I do really like and that they do fit me. They fit my size, they fit my preferences, they kind of complement my wardrobe more or less. And like I said, a couple of others I gave to my sisters who really, really like them because they're just a little bit tinier than I am. So I really like rehoming sweaters if they don't make my heart sing. There's always someone who's going to love a hand-knit sweater. Out of those 20 sweaters, I don't, of course, wear all of them all the time. What I do is I have a couple of sweaters that I tend to have in rotation. So the ones that I just shown you, those are definitely high contenders, but I tend to have like 3 or 4 sweaters in rotation at once. Depending on, if I want a super bulky one just to warm up or if I'm going out or whatever. And then I'll wear those a lot. And then at some point they will go back into my wardrobe and I'll pick a couple of other ones. So that's kind of what I do there. I also have a couple of really light sweaters that are more suitable for summer, almost like summer tops. Some of my whole super soft sweaters are definitely part of that category. And then of course, like the Let Lopi Icelandic wool yarn, that sweater is going to go into hibernation when winter ends. So I feel like I have a pretty good mix. There's a couple that I should be wearing more, to be honest. For example, what's a good example? My boxy, sorry. I don't wear a ton because the colors are really, really bright, but whenever I do wear it, I really love it. So I think I maybe just have to knit another one in more subdued colors. My Winterfjell from Ellie of Skein Deer, I don't wear as much as I would want it to because I think I kind of knitted very fitted because I did like the look, but I realized that I don't really love wearing fitted garments. So there are a couple that, I wouldn't necessarily do the same thing all over again, but all in all, I do try to wear them a lot, and I wear a hand knit sweater pretty much every day. The only exception is if I'm on work trips. Sometimes just very commercial sort of store-bought lightweight sweaters tend to be better and just a tiny bit more dressy. So I have like 2 or 3 commercial sweaters, but all the rest are all hand knitted. Moving on, how do you personally determine how long to knit a sock so it fits just right? Personally, what I do is basically what I learned from when I learned to knit socks from my grandma. So in Germany, we have these called sock tables, I guess you could call them. A lot of them are produced by the makers of the sock yarns, like Regia, I think, and like these kind of brands. If you Google them, you will find tables that tell you if you use their 4-ply sock yarn with such and such needles, you should have X amount of centimeters before you start the toe for your specific foot size. So there are tables for that. So that's how I learned to knit socks. I knit socks top down, and so I just measure from the heel to as far as I've knit on the foot. And I know that, for example, for my shoe size, I need about 21 centimeters before I start the toe. For Kai, it's about 23, and so on. So I've kind of that's how I personally do it. I know there are other ways. There are sock rulers, which I think look really fun. And I'm sure you can find lots of different ways to do it as well, but that's just my personal method. And I have a tiny bit of a trick, which isn't super fancy, but when I knit my toes, I always do wedge toes. So I decrease to a certain amount of stitches, and then I just Kitchener them. That means that if I am not 100% sure, I can of course vary at which point I start to Kitchener. So for example, usually I knit until I have 12 needles on 12 stitches on every needle, so 24 stitches, and then I Kitchener those. But if I'm not quite sure, I will try on the sock or let the recipient try the sock on when I still have 16 I will let the recipient or myself try on the sock when I still have 16 stitches per needle, so 32 stitches altogether. And if they already fit, I will just Kitchener sooner. Or if I feel like they might be a little bit too short, what I might do is I may continue decreasing down to maybe 6 stitches per needles, which is 12 altogether, or something like that. So there you can still kind of vary a tiny bit, vary how long the sock is going to be without having to rip the toe out. So that's what I do anyways. I'd be interested to know how you guys determine your foot length. And quite honestly, I've knit a ton of socks, so it does come down to practice, and every now and then I knit a sock that's a little bit too short or a little bit too long, and usually it's fine. There's a certain margin of error, which it'll be fine. I don't get it perfect every single time as well, but it usually works out. And if not, you can always gift a pair of socks to someone who has a tiny bit smaller feet or bigger feet than yours, and so on, and it'll be fine. And then before we enter the non-knitting questions, I just entered in a question that I get a lot. So I thought I might just answer that, and I hope that's interesting to you as well, which is, how do you knit so fast? How do you get so much knitting done? And so on. Like, I get a lot of comments on that. And when I'm talking about it, I don't mean to be arrogant or anything about it. It's just a question that I get a lot. And quite honestly, I don't even think I knit super fast. I just knit a lot. So on a typical day, when I'm not traveling for work, what I will do is I will always knit before I go to work. So I get maybe a solid 30 to 45 minutes of knitting time before I even start my day, which is amazing. I know not everyone is like that. Some people like to sleep until the very last possible moment. Some people have kids, and I mean, that changes things, I suppose. But yeah, that's what I do. I sometimes manage to knit on my lunch break if I'm working from home. And essentially, like, it sounds really boring, but when I'm not working, I'm usually knitting. So that definitely makes up for a lot of my progress, because I just love knitting and I do it a lot. Which doesn't have to mean that you have to knit the same amount. I mean, if you like to knit only on the weekends, that's fine. one thing that I don't do that many people seem to do, I know that lots of people take their knitting everywhere. So they take it in the car, they take it to doctor's appointments and such. I don't really do that. I also rarely ever knit when I go out with Kai or anything like that. I just prefer knitting at home on my couch, and so that's what I do the most. In terms of other reasonings why I knit fast, apparently I do continental knitting, which is a faster method most of the time. It doesn't have to be, but it may be something you want to look into if that's really something you're interested in. And lastly, someone once told me, I'm not sure who it was, it may have been my grandma, that obviously if you want to knit fast, you need to make very small movements. And that is very much, of course, true, because the more you move around, the longer it takes you. And I notice that a lot. I knit very fast on small needles. So while you think that, knitting a chunky sweater must be going really fast, for me it doesn't go that much faster, because I just knit slower, because the needles are bigger, the yarn is bigger, the movements are bigger, and so on. So for me it also depends on the kind of needle size, yarn size, and like I said, making very small movements. Talking about that also, I know a lot of people, when they tension the yarn, they wrap it around the finger a couple of times. And first of all, that will result in you having to then unwrap and rewrap the yarn, which takes time. And second of all, it does make it a little bit more uneven in terms of the tension, or at least it can. So my tip would always be to not wrap the yarn around your finger. But then again, it's your knitting. I don't want to be telling you what to do. That's just my personal experience. So now moving on to less knitting related specific questions. My friend Grace asked me, what craft or hobby have you always wanted to do but never tried? And I really thought about that, and that used to be spinning for me. I have always been interested in spinning, and then I got a drop spindle, and from there on, you all know how it went. I went into a bit of a spinning frenzy when I got my spinning wheel, I think 3 or maybe 4 years ago. I think 4 years ago, wow. And I love spinning. And to be honest, between knitting and spinning, my creative plate is very, very full. Knitting is always going to be my first love, and spinning kind of takes a back seat. And because I never have enough time to do those two things, I don't really spend much time thinking on what else I would like to do, to be honest. I used to be interested in sewing, but tried it and realized I like the idea of sewing more than I actually like sewing. Strangely, I'm not really interested in crochet or weaving or the whole needlepoint cross-stitch embroidery thing. But I'm happy to always try stuff. So, if something comes my way in terms of crafting, I'll always give it a go. But I don't have that one thing that I'm dreaming of doing, and I'm sure it'll come at some point, but right now my creative platter is pretty full. Someone asked, what's your favorite coffee? I love coffee, as you know. My least favorite coffee, well, maybe to start that way, is filter coffee that's gone cold. Like, there's nothing worse than, strong filter coffee and then it just gets cold and then you drink it and it's just terrible. And that's all. I drink that all the time at work, and I just hate it. Like, there's nothing worse than bad and cold coffee. In terms of what I drink the most, I can't have any milk products, not because I'm vegan, but because of an intolerance. So I love having soy milk with my coffee, so I make myself soy lattes with an espresso machine. I know there are more ethical ways to drink coffee, and I am looking into those, but at the moment that's what I'm doing. I have a coffee with warm soy milk, and sometimes I put a little bit of vanilla syrup on it because I love it. And then lastly, a question that I also get a lot, and I got from a viewer on Instagram, was in what field do you work? Does it relate to your university major? And warning, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here. I studied psychology. I got my master's in psychology, so I'm actually crazily allowed to call myself a psychologist. And I'm sure my friend Ellie will appreciate this, because what people tend to think about when they think of psychologists are, someone lying on a couch and, getting therapy. And the thing is that psychology is much more than that. The typical sort of, clinical image that you have of psychologists tends to be more in terms of psychotherapy, which is a difference. So there are people who are psychologists who are working in research. There are people who are working in engineering. Like I have a friend who is kind of designing, user-friendly cars. Like psychologists do all kinds of really, really interesting stuff. And although I did do a lot of majoring in clinical sort of psychology, and I kind of saw myself going that route, I am now working in HR. So HR is short for human resources, and that's exactly what I'm doing. So the funny thing is that I think, and a lot of my colleagues think, that that's totally related to what I studied. But there are also a lot of people who say that has nothing to do with psychology. But I think it does. And so what I really do is I work for a IT startup firm we have a couple of offices in Germany, and I do HR. So I do everything from recruiting to like personnel development. At the moment, I'm doing a lot of work on team culture and culture within a firm. So that sort of thing. And yeah, I think it very much relates to my field of work, but I realize that not everyone feels that way. I also haven't really talked very much about the content of my work in the past because I do like to keep that sort of separate. I'm not sure if it's necessary, but it's kind of necessary for my peace of mind. And also my work tends to, at least for me, be a little bit stressful. So for me, knitting is kind of the opposite of stressful, and I have my work life and my knitting podcast community Instagram life, and I like to keep that somewhat separate. So that in a nutshell is what I do on a daily basis. I hope that was somewhat interesting to you. That also ends the questions for today. But like I said, if you have more, do please put them below, and I will somewhere note them and maybe do more sort of Q&A videos in the future. So do let me know if that's something you're interested in. If not, that's totally fine as well, of course. I'm going to go back to my knitting after editing this, and I am so glad that you watched it. Thank you so much for joining in, and I will see you very soon. Happy knitting! Bye!